A pleasure. It's not every day that one gets invited to the India Today Conclave.
We hope to have you here the next time around as well.
I did someone's done a poor job of selecting me. I have no business being here. So somebody needs to get a poor performance rating. Well, I'm thrilled.
That's all right. Even if someone's done a good job or a bad job, the one thing that they've all done is watch Ankur Warikoo's videos on YouTube, on Instagram, millions of hits. And of course, he was a well-known name in the world of business before the pandemic. And then suddenly in the pandemic, if you haven't seen an Ankur Warikoo video, you were living under a rock, Ankur. What was that shift like from nearby to Groupon? I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about your journey, and you can motivate all of us here at the India Today Conclave.
Thank you so much for that. A very good evening to all of you, and thank you for having me again, Ayush. I'm just so lucky to be living this life right now. It wasn't planned, as was many things in my life so far. I decided to take a break from Nearby, which was the previous startup that I was running. And at the end of 2019, a 3-month break sounded like a good plan. And then March 2020 comes. The world goes to a complete spin. Everyone's locked up, and I am thinking of what next to do. I've had such a wonderful time building startups, learning from the mistakes that I've made, that I wanted to start sharing that with an audience, and I started creating content, which I had been for a while, but never with the rigor that I have had right now. And I believe that there was an audience waiting for that content, so I'm just so lucky that I was at the right place at the right time.
And that audience seemed to be craving, basically an audience in their 20s, craving something relatable. What did all of us young creators not do right, that Ankur Warikoo came in there and swept everything up?
I believe the biggest thing was talking openly about failure and how everybody, irrespective of how successful they seem at the face of it, have gone through a phase that would be extremely difficult, challenging, and they have to recognize that that is perhaps the reason why they are where they are. So at the age of 42, when I'm speaking to somebody who is 18 to 24-year-old, one, they would believe that I have the experience to have whatever is it that I'm saying. But two, if I openly admit as well that, hey, I have failed, here is where I went wrong, this is what I learned from that, that would be a completely authentic way of connecting with somebody, which they perhaps have not seen as much as they would have liked to.
It's just interesting, Ankur, because at some point or the other, as a business journalist or even in your original avatar, our paths would have crossed. Because when I was a kid, I always dreamed of becoming an astronaut. But you also thought of being the first man on Mars. Now, is that something that we're just, giving as this PR spiel, or is that the true story? Because you did go to pursue your PhD in the US, but you dropped out. Then you come back and pursue an MBA. How did that whole chakra really happen?
So it's true. I had a 3-step plan for my life. Step 1 was to go to the US to get a PhD. Step 2 was to become a space scientist and join NASA. And step 3 was to become the first man on Mars. And if you speak to anybody from my school and ask them, hey, do you remember Ankur Warikoo? They're like, shayad. What do you remember of him? And they'll be like, usko NASA jana tha. Like, that was my identity.
And mind you, this is much before Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk spoke about
This is before Elon Musk has come into the picture. This is before Shah Rukh Khan has come back to India in the movie Swades as a NASA engineer. So none of this is polluted by Bollywood or pop culture. And when I went to the US for my PhD, which I was grateful to experience, I realized that what I was doing, which was physics, was something that I was good at, but it didn't make me happy. And it was for the first time, Ayush, it struck me that what you're good at or what makes you happy could be two entirely different things. It was a shocking revelation for me, and I couldn't deal with that. I needed time to process it. And the only thing that I kept reminding myself, which I hoped was true, and now I know it is, if I'm not happy doing something, I will never be the best at it. Khatam. That's it. So it was just a very, very courageous move on my part. I do not know where I got that courage from, but I decided to step down from the PhD program, come back to India. I was completely confused. And my friends were like, hey, you're confused? So why don't you do what most confused people do? Go get an MBA. And I don't know how many of you are MBAs in the room, but we would sheepishly raise our hands to admit the fact that most MBAs, when they go on to do one, are just clueless about what to do in life, and that's why they did. That was pretty much the journey for me as well. But that 1 year at ISB just fundamentally changed me and everything about me, so I'm glad I went through that.
And while everyone's watched your content and your ads throughout the pandemic, I can imagine everyone here on YouTube has seen an Ankur Warikoo ad and then subscribed. So kudos to you for that, because your ads were quite tantalizing that way. But
when you were going through this process, a little known fact that people don't really know about is that you were running a blog for what, 16, 17 years? And then you came in front of the camera. That must have been a transition for you.
The transition happened much earlier, Ayush, but it was a big transition even when it happened to the scale that it did. So you're right, and I'm very impressed that you know this fact. I started blogging when I was a business school student at ISB. So it started in 2005. I still write a blog every single day.
Yeah.
It gives me immense joy to write. And I started creating video content around 2015.
That's right.
My YouTube channel started in 2017. So I had been creating content, but it was very niche, English, entrepreneurship focused. So there was a strata of society that would appeal, be driven towards it, but not necessarily a mass audience that is today. And when I started to go deep into the content, I changed to English. I changed to much broader subjects such as personal finance and career and so on. And that changed the scale of how it has been.
You spoke about learning from failure and being resilient. We had Pratik Kohar here and we're having a chat with him yesterday. And a lot of his inspirations in terms of music were heartbreak and love. You speak about that as well sometimes though, personal finance aside. But was your experience at Nearby and Groupon, the fact that it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, was that really a big inspiration and a real influence to really drive you in this direction?
I remain a student of reflection. I believe that very often when we fail, particularly in our culture, we are told to very quickly move on. Chalo, chalo, koi baat nahi, aage badho. We either don't want to fail at all, or once we have failed, we just want to quickly move on. And I believe that that's such a regretful way of looking at failure, because everybody in the world fails, but not everybody succeeds. So there must be something between failure and success that makes success happen. And for me, that is reflection. So every single time that I have failed in life, and I have plenty of times, I have taken a pause, reflected upon why I got myself into that situation in the first place, so as to hopefully know what not to do the next time around. And I would believe that that is the biggest reason why I continue to be a student and learn from the failures that I have had, and I wouldn't wish them away any single day of my life.
Fantastic. You know what I really appreciate? Globally, when we're talking about YouTubers and creators, we have Mr. Beast in the US, we have Ali Abdaal in the UK, and now we have Ankur Warikoo here in India, who are very transparent about their career, their experiences, and even their earnings. Ankur Warikoo, headline grabbing 17 crores. How I made 17 crores. And that's become a huge, crowd puller with some of your ads as well. What was your thought process? And did you actually make 17 crores?
I wouldn't lie about that thing. So yes, it did happen. I didn't make it personally. It's a business that made it. So please don't account it as personal income.
I mean, if anyone is watching, we should clarify.
Like, to all those who may come in the evening to check on me, this is a lie. I have been very grateful, Ayush, that I started my content creation journey after my entrepreneurial stint. So I learned what it takes to build things for scale and to do it in a manner that's systematic, it's process-driven, and it's people-driven. So when I look at content every day, I do not look at it as a passion project. I do not look at it as content creation. I look at it as a business and as a process. So I often go on record saying creativity for me is not one flash in the pan that happens someday. Creativity for me is a process and clinically executed. Did I have a goal or a target before I started this? Where will it be? Absolutely not. So I remain a student of habits, and I commit myself to habits, and I'm then always impressed at how far they take me, which is the case in this case as well.
But it mustn't have been easy, Ankur. At the age of 40, a pandemic really coming our way, and you're planning to recalibrate. You've done this a couple of times before. I wonder how family reacts to that. And this time you had a wife and kids, and you started off literally like a startup with this whole content creation journey, and you're viewing this as a startup. Has that really benefited you as well? How did it start?
It started genuinely with me just trying to see how far it can go and how big can it become, with fundamentally no idea of what the end outcome could be. So I stand here as not somebody who knew exactly how it's going to be. So please don't think of my success as something that was planned or something that was anticipated. I cannot justify my success, nor can I own it. What I do is enjoy my success and remain committed to how the journey works. And what's beautiful, at least between my wife and I, and we're very aligned on that, is this fundamental realization कि हम जिंदगी में भूखे नंगे नहीं मरेंगे. There is enough that we are born into, there is enough privilege that we have, enough backing from education, values and so on, that we will survive and we will never struggle for survival. So the goal is now, how far can you make your own life meaningful for your own self? And I just continue experimenting with that, and wherever it takes me, I'll happily go. So if there is anybody who asks me that quintessential interview question, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? My answer is, I do not know. But I am okay with that. I am absolutely okay not knowing where I will be 5 years from now, because I just love the surprise that life keeps throwing at me.
So well put. And I'm glad to know that it's not just in your YouTube videos, it's so relatable when you're chatting even here at the India Today Conclave. But I want to understand that piece as well. So when you're planning to monetize, a lot of people try to figure out how do these creators, these YouTubers, and now you've joined the band, how do they make money? And there are several revenue streams. If you could just paint it out for us, right? You not only do you make money from ads, you also do brand collaborations, and then of course there are educational courses as well.
So there's a beautiful thing about content that I realized. When you create content and you do get the attention and the effort of individuals viewing you, you can use it for either of two purposes. You can use it to sell something directly, which is what I believe most people end up making a mistake. Because when you sell something directly, eventually people will begin to see that ye kuch bech raha hai. And your content will never get that kind of trust or respect that it deserves. The other way to do that is to think of your content as a trust engine and not a sales engine. That's what I do for my business. Every day I create content. At any point of time, none of that content is ever directed towards, please buy this from me. Those are my ads, which is a completely separate line. All that I'm doing is hopefully adding value to people's life and doing it in a fashion that they build trust in me. And if that happens, then I have this flywheel of digital marketing that just overlays on top of that trust. So a lot of people would see my ads and they would not know who I am, and that's perfectly fine. But if they were to go and look me up, they would see years and years of hopefully good quality content serving a purpose of helping them, and that would make them convert. And there are multiple revenue streams that you can unlock through content as a trust engine, which is what I've tried to do.
No, absolutely. And while you're talking about all of this, building trust, creating that sort of credible brand, you look back at your corporate career and the time when you're pursuing that PhD and this whole story that you've got, which is fascinating for a lot of us. It's a tumultuous, circuitous sort of story, lots of twists and turns. Do you think that really contributed in building your personal brand? And what is the importance of the brand Warikoo that we now know of?
What I selfishly do is I pick up all of my failures and make them into stories. And I'm so grateful that people look at those stories and relate to them, because in some way they could have very well said, oh, that's a failure, that's a loser, I shouldn't be listening to that person, I should be listening to everybody who's succeeded in life. But I think the way that I project it is, if you think that I've done anything even remotely successful to be here in my life, here are all the points where I faltered, and miserably so. So you should never ever feel that it is game over for you if you find yourself in that. Did I make it to the IITs? No, I didn't. Did I make it to the top university that I wanted to apply to in the US? No, I didn't. Did I make it to the top MBA schools at that point of time? No, I didn't. Did I make it to the top consulting firms that I wanted to get a job out of? No, I didn't. Did I get through the top VCs that I wanted to raise money from? No, I didn't. There were so many aspects in my life that I very selfishly, as a content creator, start picking up and say, I hope that this is something that gives people confidence, inspiration, and feels liberating for them.
Millions of Gen Z and millennials who reached out to you, and I know through the pandemic as well, because every couple of days you were doing an Instagram live where people were pouring their hearts out open to you, and you should just get them in on a live session, counsel them, mentor them. And I think that was very candid and very genuine from viewing it as a viewer. But what are the top kind of requests you get? Because you build content basis on what audience insights you're getting. So what are the top requests you get? And from these, everyone's trying to crack now millennials are so yesterday. Everyone's trying to crack Gen Z, and you've already cracked it, so give us some insights.
I think there are top 3 things which repeat themselves day in and day out, in no particular order. They are extremely worried about what they will do professionally in their life, because they have so many options that they just cannot process. Unlike the era that perhaps we belong from, where it was an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or a chartered accountant and so on. Whether you liked it or not was a different story altogether, but these were the stable avenues. Now you could technically be a YouTuber and make lots of money. So should you become an engineer or a YouTuber and so on? So career is number one. Number two is making money. Everyone's in a race of making money, and it's very interesting because they want to make money to invest money. They don't want to make money to necessarily spend on sneakers or phones and all of that, while that is definitely part of their plan. But they do want to invest because they believe that that's a smart way of looking at your money and something very different from how their parents did. And number three, perpetual relationships. They're constantly struggling because social media has made it so hard to form meaningful relationships that they do not know how to process a breakup. They do not know how to make meaningful friendships. They do not know how to approach strangers and have an interesting conversation. And they keep reaching out saying, hey, I do not know, I'm an introvert, and they don't even understand what's the difference between introversion and extroversion and how does that energy level process within themselves. So they're just using blanket words to label themselves, but these would be the three: career, money, and relationships.
Just building on that, and I might just be, shooting blindly in the air, but the fact, and it's a crazy revelation that this is what kids are coming to you with. Do you think, you understand the Indian education system, the American education system, the way we've had it all this while, the conservative way, the ratta marna, right? Has that led to a lot of these youngsters now coming to YouTube, to influencers like you, to get the education they always crave for?
You've summed it up perfectly, Ayush. I believe what's happening for the first time in global history is true democratization of education, where people are learning not just from their textbooks and their school teachers and their college professors, but they're learning from people that they can relate to. And suddenly you have a platform where you could learn from the best faculty for a particular subject and not be geographically constrained or even economically. And that's unprecedented. It's going to open up boundaries that most people did not ever imagine would be possible.
It's kind of interesting. From nearby, Groupon, maybe you'll end up on Mars at some point, but with your content now, you've got a revenue stream coming in, you've got a massive engaged audience, and you're talking about education, you're saying all the right things. Could we have Ankur, Warikoo coming back with a startup sometime soon?
I think it's already in the motion. I just wouldn't want to call it a startup because I don't know what is a startup anymore or not. So I am working on an education startup, but can I call it a startup? Most likely not, because it doesn't fit the quintessential checklist. But I'd like to believe I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and whatever I do, even if it's content, is a startup.
Going forward, what's the way forward for Ankur, Warikoo? What are you going to do, barring content and this startup? Are there other plans that are you holding them too close to your chest, these cards?
I do not know the answer to that, and I hope to have that answer as I unfold myself.
Fantastic, Ankur. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us here at the India Today Conclave. It's been a fascinating session. Thank you for being a lovely audience. And it's good to know that as relatable as you are in your videos, you're as charming out here in person as well. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ayush. Thank you all.
Always a pleasure. Ankur, thank you so much. Could I request Karthik Vishwanathan, Senior Manager, Indian Subcontinent at Qatar Airways, to join us and share with Ankur a token of our appreciation today.